Hello and welcome to cell communication, chemical communication. And this first part of our talk is going to be on hormones. And you and I, we are, that's one of the things of the human experience. We have hormones and we should respect them. Here we go. They're sending a letter. Hello. So, the second part of the series will be on neurons. Cell communication involves a couple steps, a couple of characters. So first of all, there is the ligand, which is the hormone, and that travels between cells. That's a communication signal. That can be hormones, which we're going to be talking about today, and they do travel long distances all over your body. There also are neurotransmitters, which is going to be the second half of the talk. And they just travel short distances, a nanometer. And I don't know if you remember the eicosanoids. Remember those guys? They're the ones that confused you. All the prostaglandin 1, 2, 3, what do they do? Just eat healthy. We're not going to be talking more about them, but they are involved in cell communication. They are just from one cell to the ones that are around them. So they don't travel long distances, in my understanding. And there are also, what are the cytokines? So cyto means cell, and these are immunomodulating peptide signals. So they're very important in our immune system. And because of our situation this term, this was one of my things I had hoped to be able to investigate. But I'm learning how to record myself instead. All right, so that's the ligand. They almost never enter the cell. Instead, they bind the receptor. So the receptor is the second character here. And the receptor, if you remember when we drew our cell membranes, they are one of those proteins that is embedded in the cell membrane. So receptors are going to always be proteins. The ligand is going to be different classes of chemical proteins. Sorry, not of chemical compounds. So we'll see that on the next slide. And I know many of you take anatomy and you get to do endocrinology and neuro stuff. We're going to be looking at it from a chemist standpoint and looking at the chemicals involved. This is a picture because it shows what happens sometimes, but not always. So there's the first messenger, which is the hormone or the neurotransmitter. This is our protein, this purple blob, and then something happens inside the cell. Now, sometimes, not always, and I will point out when this happens, is, well, here it's showing you like a G protein gets connected, blah, blah, blah. You don't really need to know all that detail unless you get really inspired. But some of our hormones will actually work through a second messenger cascade. And the importance of a second messenger is it's inside the cell already. It's there. It's just waiting to be activated. So when we're in class, I usually talk about it. We're inside the classroom. So the walls of the classroom are like our cell membrane. And the doorway, we'll say, is the receptor. And whoever sits in that back corner by the door, they will be here, this red ball, waiting to tell us. So if somebody comes and knocks on the door, this hormone doesn't enter the cell, just knocks on the door. And that kicks us into action. And then that person who answers the door tells the rest of us, go do your stuff. So we're all just waiting in the cell, and then we go and tell everything to do their thing. And we'll see that as we go through these slides. So we're going to look at hormones, and we're going to go through 3 chemical classes of hormones. Now, I will tell you, this field is expanding exponentially, it feels like. And so there are probably other classes now, but we're going to go through the 3 main ones. When we get into neurotransmitters, I actually have one that says other because there's a bunch of them that don't fall into the classical chemical classes. All right, so the 3 classes. The first one we've already talked about. Actually, we've talked about all 3 of these. But we're going to come back and look at them from this perspective. So the first one are the steroids. So you want to write down what these 3 are, and then we'll go through each one at a time. And you need to know examples or recognize examples. So testosterone, progesterone, estrogen, cortisone. those are all different steroids. And the big thing to remember, hopefully you remember about steroids, these were on your first midterm, and they fell under lipids. They all were made from, do you remember what chemical made them all? Cholesterol. And they are hydrophobic. That is important. Of all the ligands, of all these first messengers we're going to talk about, steroids are special because they are hydrophobic. All right, the second category are polypeptides. They are called polypeptides instead of proteins because they tend to be smaller. But again, you can think of those words interchangeably. And so these are 3 examples. There's actually bunches of examples. So insulin, human growth hormone, oxytocin. Again, it would be recognizing it. So you can see this is a question on your midterm. Which of these is a steroid? And so insulin, you would not pick because that is a polypeptide. Polypeptides often use second messengers. I do not know if it's an always. I'm not going to worry about that, but they do often use second messengers. And the third category are called the amino acid derivative. It doesn't have an S at the end because there is only considered to be one, which is epinephrine. Now, I'm going to make a quick disclaimer here. When we get to neurotransmitters, the amino acid derivatives show up there. And there are several compounds that were classically considered neurotransmitters that some now consider as hormones. I've kept them in the category as neurotransmitters because but we're not going to worry about is it a hormone or is it a neurotransmitter. So for right now, I'll just introduce epinephrine when we get to that slide. All right, and epinephrine, these guys do use a second messenger. And this you can learn about when you take anatomy, if you ever take anatomy, which is your endocrine system. So we have these glands in our body that release hormones, and then they act all over our body and have specific responses. So that you do not need to know what comes from where. You might hear me mention it. This is more my passion, that it turns out, so the chakra system is from yoga, Ayurvedic India, ancient India, and so it does actually correspond to all our endocrine glands, and which is a segue into what our lab is going to be about this week. All right, and this is just another picture of it that they talked about, that many people have done online and talked about, and that each of these actually do release certain hormones. It's kind of interesting. I like to think of it more like this, that we're a vine growing, a tree growing up and flowering in each one. All right. So what are those? You should look at the rings and say, oh, those are steroids, really casually. Yes, they are. From the names also. And so we get that 4-ring structure, and their precursor, of course, is cholesterol. And what is so special about this class? It is that they are hydrophobic. They don't like water. There's like one little oxygen, right? So these guys are very hydrophobic, and that is going to make them very special. So hopefully you're still taking notes. This picture is wonderful. I do have words. So the steroid receptor is located inside the cell. This is different from all the others we'll talk about. All the others, the receptor is in the cell membrane, but this guy's receptor is inside the cell. And the reason for that is that steroids, that should not have been the reason why, that steroids cross the cell membrane because they're hydrophobic. The cell membrane is hydrophobic, and the steroid can cross the membrane, and then it binds to its receptor. So once it gets inside the cell, the cytoplasm is water-based. It's hydrophilic. And so it needs a little boat to carry it around. And so the steroid has a boat that carries it from the place where it's produced to the place of action. It crosses, it gets released, crosses the membrane, and then it gets another boat, which is called its receptor. And that boat carries it to the cell nucleus, where it crosses another membrane all on its own and binds to the DNA. Regulation, this was from the enzyme lecture. This is called genetic regulation. Our steroids actually change what DNA is part of. DNA is going to make our proteins. Steroids determine what proteins your body is going to make. And this is why steroids are so dangerous, and why people like bodybuilders who take steroids, they do get very ill and end up with cancers and usually die before 40 or in their early 40s. It's not pretty. Don't do steroids. All right, how fast is this type of regulation? I don't even know if you remember, this is the slowest type, because the steroid needs a boat to carry it to the cell, has to go all the way in, binding to the DNA. And then we have to make the protein from scratch. We have to make the RNA, and then we make the new protein, which it's trying to show you up here in purple. So it's very slow, say 2 hours. So not like a million years, but it's a couple hours. There's a big exception. The problem is, once you start the whole thing going, it keeps going. And so it's hard to stop it once it's started. So let's talk about DHEA. So nobody's picked this topic, like, ever, but why should you care about this topic? Well, if you have low DHEA, these are some of the causes. That if you smoke anything, if you're obsessed with money, so that you start smoking money. Aging causes low DHEA. DHEA here, if you notice, is right here, and it is the precursor for our sex hormones. And so this is why for women, menopause, estrogen drops, DHEA drops. Stress will cause a decrease. Stress is this pathway over here. They're both coming from cholesterol, and DHEA is this pathway. Yeah, eating sugar. Hopefully you're not eating sugar, eating fast food, eating junk food. Hopefully you're not in line for that. Oh, and the medication that lowers your cholesterol also lowers your DHEA and lowers your testosterone. Oh, but we have a pill to make sure that your levels come back up. What are some of the effects? Well, your heart is not very happy. Your heart is fatigued. Oh, and cancers. So breast cancer. But all of the sexual cancers, so prostate cancer, all the different ones for women in reproductive cancers, bone fractures, and you just can't sleep. You don't sleep very well, and you basically have no sex drive because you don't have any testosterone. All right, when we go through these slides, whenever you see a number, I read a wonderful article a year ago called The Molecules of Meditation, and it inspired this. And so DHEA, this is the full name of it, dihydroepiandrosterone, and it is called the longevity molecule. And it is called that because they actually will measure levels, and it will tell you what your true biological age is. And it can sometimes be disturbing because you all are very young and feel healthy, but you might find out that, oh, on the inside, you're not as healthy as you think. It is because it's the precursor to the sex hormones. And this is a guy who did research, and he found in regular meditators, their levels went up by 43.77%. It's very precise here. I just want to point out, because your lab, week 6, I think we're on lab 6, is going to be to meditate for a week. I give you 2 weeks because usually this takes a little bit of time. I will talk about more at the end of the neurotransmitter one, but I do want to point out this is not meditation. It could be, but it doesn't mean you have to sit on the ground with your feet crossed in this crazy position and be touching Mother Earth, and that does not mean you're meditating. It means you're quieting everything down. All right. When you have high DHEA, it means you have low cortisol. And meditation, it turns out, lowers your cortisol because it raises your DHEA. So remember this guy, cortisol? We talked about him when we did the steroids. This is your stress hormone. And if you're always stressed, you're always releasing cortisol. So you're suppressing the DHEA, the longevity hormone. You're sending your body, your liver thinks that you're always stressed. So it's trying to make more glucose because that's what our body is meant to do. This is making new glucose, and your body didn't need it. This means glucose not from your diet, new glucose. It's making it from your amino acids. So it's breaking down your muscles, and your liver is just, that's what it's meant to do when you're stressed. Cortisol says, make glucose. And so then your liver goes, what am I supposed to do with all this glucose? And so it just stores it as belly fat. And it decreases your immune system. It decreases your digestive, because if you really had a real stress, you don't need to fight off a bug. You need to get away from the real stress. So it'd be like the saber-toothed tiger or something. So our immune system gets suppressed. So the number one thing, suppressing our immune system, and you're going to have more colds. You're going to have, this is cancer again. It depresses your thyroid, it presses your liver detoxification process, and it shifts your pathway. And if you have low DHEA, your kidneys are just overwhelmed. You have low of progesterone, testosterone. So again, low, all those things we just talked about with DHEA 2 slides ago. It also affects serotonin, which is not a steroid. So progesterone is one of the things that helps to stimulate serotonin. Serotonin is the happy hormone, or sorry, the happy neurotransmitter. And so depression is very highly linked to serotonin. So why don't we learn to control stress? And then our serotonin can come to higher numbers. And also suppresses melatonin, which we'll be talking about in the next slideshow. So we don't want cortisol, we want DHEA. So high DHEA, low cortisol, how can you shift it? Well, you could just be your inner child. Go be playful with your exercise. So exercise and be playful with it. Gratitude, and this is meditation. Regular meditators actually see a 50% decrease in cortisol. So the doctor's name on the previous slide. And so as the one goes down, the other one goes up. So you're getting wonderful effects. Then you're not getting all of this. All right. And just a reminder, so stressed, right? Dessert. So sunshine also helps decrease cortisol. Laughter. Just keeping a smile on your face is contagious. Exercise while you're smiling outside. Look at that. And smiling while you sleep. And eating healthy. Plant-based healthy. And smiling when you're eating. This is, I'm trying to inspire also some of you to pick a topic, hopefully, in this next week or two. This is about aromatase, and aromatase ends with ACE, so it is an enzyme. You don't need to know much more about it. I've apparently spelled it wrong. It should have had an A there, but it is what changes testosterone to estradiol, and when that's where we see proliferation of breast cancer. And so what will inhibit aromatase so that we don't get high levels of estradiol and end up with breast cancer is eating your vegetables. Yeah, remember those cruciferous vegetables that we talked about? The sulforaphane that was in them? And carrots too, because it has beta carotene. All right, and being playful. The next category, so that was steroids. There are other steroids, so if somebody wants to pick one of those as a topic, Dominique already did. The next category of our hormones is the amino acid derivatives. They are also known as monoamines, and that is because they They were made from an amino acid, but they no longer have the acid part. They have the amino part. So they're called a monoamine because they have one amino group there. And the receptor they bind to when was discovered first was called a catecholamine receptor. And so this is one like blood pressure medications and a lot work on. So you will run into these other names. A catecholamine is when you have this group. This is called catechol, which is when you have these two OHs on the benzene ring next to each other, if you care about that. But the big one, the one for the amino acid derivative that is considered a hormone is epinephrine, or it's also known as adrenaline. So again, it was isolated in 2 different places. So it is in your adrenal glands. That is when it's called adrenaline. Then they realized it's produced in different places in our body because it has such an important response. It is our fight or flight response, a lot of that going on. And when you take anatomy, you get to learn all the things that happen. So something happens, we need to get away. You have a mugger coming after you, you need to get away. You're going to turn off your digestion. You're going to turn off all the things, your immune system. You're going to turn off your digestion, and you're going to turn on your heart, your respiratory, your muscles to get away. All right. So this is our autonomic nervous system. You don't need to know that, but the fight or flight is adrenaline, but it actually has a pair which is now given the rest and digest. So yoga, end of every yoga class, you do shavasana. I had a friend when I was doing the yoga training, and he would always say shavasana. And it's actually the crucial, most important part of yoga. So you're doing yoga to slow down the stress response so you can have a true shavasana. It's supposed to be at least 10 minutes because it takes that long for you to fully get into this. And a lot of people do fall asleep, but it is what happens in shavasana where you just lay down at the end, they turn the lights off, and you're just breathing. It allows your parasympathetic to come on. You cannot have both on at the same time, so you can't have stress. You will be resting and allow your body to have digestion. So many digestive disorders, because if you're always up here, you're not. So if you're stressed, you do not digest. So let's talk about that. So stress and poor digestion, your stomach pH actually will not, if you're stressed, your stomach pH is not actually ever low enough to do what it's supposed to do. And we want our stomach pH below 2.5 because that's where the denaturing of our proteins happens, right? The salt bridges get changed, and then we can have digestion. So those enzymes that digest proteins have to have that low pH, and so you don't get digestion. And yeah, you also cannot open, pyloric gate doesn't open correctly, and you get acid reflux. And you get a B12 deficiency. So B12 is absorbed at a low pH. So all these people who take antacids, or even worse, the medication that changes your stomach pH, they're also going to have a B12 deficiency. And B12 is an interesting topic too. Poor protein breakdown, so I just mentioned, and your small intestine microbes will change because there are microbes in different parts of your small intestine, and if the food coming out is not getting broken down to where it needs to for the small intestine to do the rest of the breaking down, the microbes are not going to happen, and you are going to feel like this gingerbread cookie, which is you're going to feel bloated, you're going to feel gassy, and you want to feel like these. You want to feel beautiful. And so your microbiome, your microbiota is so important. Eating healthy and staying calm. So rest and digest. So this is the YouTube, I think it was a TED Talk, talked about this. It was a wonderful TED Talk, inspired this. So keeping our microbiome happy, it's more than just what you eat. And that's what we're going to be segueing into for these next few weeks. And so they talked about there are 3 things you should do every time you eat. You should first, when you sit down, so it was a woman who was a mother of 4, and she just suddenly developed, she had been a runner, and she ran every day, and she felt like she was fit, and she ate really healthy, but yet she was bloated all the time, she was fatigued, and so they sat down, and they kind of talked to her, and it turned out she basically was never actually sitting down to eat. She was always hassled and stuff, and so they said, and she started doing these 3 things, and everything changed. And so it is more than just what you eat. Hopefully now you've all made those changes so you're eating healthier, but also sitting down and taking a few deep breaths before you eat. And deep breaths means your diaphragm pushes down on your digestive tract, your belly comes out. Nobody has to see your belly. Your belly is supposed to expand like opera singer, and chew your food. You have to chew your food until it becomes liquid in your mouth, and that helps your saliva to lubricate as it's going down and reaching your stomach. So you want to chew your food. So not wolfing it down, not eating in the car. A lot of us aren't driving around as much these days, but yeah. All right. And number 3 is saying grace every time you sit down, even if you're doing those snacks and those power bars, which I think are highly processed food. Every time you eat, you should say some words of gratitude, and which requires you to take a few deep breaths. Right? That's one of my goals, healthy changes that I keep working on. So the question is, which came first, the healthy mindset or the healthy microbiome? And really the question is, does it matter which came first? All right, so moving on, this is a reminder that the monoamines, amino acid derivatives, work through a second messenger. So this would be epinephrine is the first messenger. It binds its receptor. It does not enter the cell. It is hydrophilic. The receptor just morphs, hits a G protein, hits another enzyme, and boom, stuff happens. A whole bunch of stuff. There's just lots of fun cartoons about cell communication. All right. Our third category are the polypeptide hormones, proteins. Insulin's the big one here. It's just showing you, remember the amino acids, alpha helix. All right, and yes, of course, insulin is related to diabetes, digestion. I saw an amazing YouTube video about a year ago, and it changed a lot of my thoughts on diabetes and insulin. And if you watch those videos, the first, second lab, depending which video you watched, the one doctor talked about that children with obesity actually suffer from high levels of insulin. And when they actually suppress the insulin, people are like, what? No, we're supposed to be giving people insulin. But when they suppress the insulin, their body went back to normal. There's actually a panel of doctors who are wondering, have we been looking at this whole thing from the wrong perspective? And there's some really good, TED Talks are wonderful because they're 15 minutes. But they said, was diabetes actually our body protecting itself? So people go into type 2 diabetes, their cells can no longer take in the food. Is it the body saying, you have overfed us, let's just like cleanse here? And so they kind of the body turns itself off. I don't know, it's just a thought. I'm not saying they're right or wrong, but it's an interesting perspective. And again, my doctorate, actually, I worked in the lab. I told you that they developed the first insulin pump. And so this is what actually is going on. So there is way up here, see it, the insulin receptor, and that's insulin, that little triangle. It's really tiny compared to the receptor. It never enters, binds the receptor, and then boom, this is what the second messenger does. The second messenger says, everything start working. These are all different enzymes that are stimulated by insulin. It used to be called the black box, like this area here, because they didn't know what happened. They knew some of these things. They knew some of this up here. And since the time I was in school 20 years ago, and this picture, they pretty much filled in all the steps of what all these things, because insulin is so important for metabolism of all our food, not just carbohydrates, and then of the storage or usage of them. So you can see fatty acid synthesis or storing as glycogen, and we'll talk about that. Yeah, I like this. This is just bad. And this is called SOS. So, all right. There's also this is actually a cytokine. So cytokines are a huge field, but the growth factors are considered cytokines as opposed to hormones. But I included this here because almost always when you get high insulin, you also end up with high insulin-like growth factor. So on the previous slide, I'm going to go back. Sorry, there was insulin, the picture of it, and yeah, we have it looks somewhat similar, but it's actually a growth factor and does exactly what it says. And how you get high levels of it, eating the American diet, which is processed carbohydrate, so the bread, and animal protein. The animal protein with this processed carbohydrate. So this gives you high insulin. The insulin growth factors coming from the animal protein. With the sugar processed, gets us high levels of this, and this is a growth factor. It accelerates aging. It is why puberty is happening like at 8 or 10-year-olds. It's not supposed to be that early. And also the offspring are much larger than we're supposed to be. And many of you probably went through this. Some of you have actually told me some of your story. Because this junk food was what you grew up on. You guys are the generation that's supposed to live. Actually, your parents might outlive you, which is really hard on me as a parent, because the junk food wasn't there. It started showing up. I'm not perfect. I do not have a perfect, clean record. But it also, whenever you have aging, it's going to make cells. Angiogenesis means you start creating blood vessels to cells that are going, oh, we're not supposed to be growing. Okay. If you insist, and you get higher rates of cancer. So I had a book last year that I read about diet and angiogenesis, how you can regulate angiogenesis and cancer with diet and stuff. Higher rates of dementia, higher rates of inflammation, and inflammation is a big one right now because in the news you're hearing about the children who are dying who have from inflammatory issues. And so how do we reduce insulin-like growth factor? That doesn't sound, none of this sounds good, right? Well, one is caloric restriction. Like we eat way too much. And right now people have gone crazy because everybody's so afraid. And so people did. And so, yeah, don't eat as much and don't eat junk food. But this is also the caloric restriction. So you guys should have hopefully started a second 30-day one. And if we were together, I would also mention, these monks need to do caloric restriction, but there's the intermittent fasting. And so that has not shown up. It showed up in one little thing, and I don't know where it shows up. But I've had students who did. They did that for their 30-day restriction. So I know some of you, we're going to try and do 30 days with no meat, eating beans every day. 30 days of eating only 8 hours a day. So I think I don't start eating until after 10 o'clock, and I do my best to stop before 6 or even before 4. And so it's eating only 8 hours in the day. So you're giving your body a chance for the insulin to come down and to go into a rest phase. So if you're eating, the mindset of this country is we need to eat 16 hours of the day, then your body's always producing insulin, and insulin tells your body to store. So that was that previous slide. Yeah, okay, sorry, I don't want to go all the way back. And so insulin says take food in and store. store. But we need a point where our body goes into the rest phase, where it does start releasing that and does start repairing the rest of our body. And so that's the idea of only eating for 8 hours of the day. And so 9 till 5. So we eat our breakfast, eat lunch, eat dinner, and then you don't need to eat at night. I didn't eat snacks at night when I was a kid. I don't know why we think kids have to have a snack before they go to bed. No, they definitely need food, but not that kind of food. And the other big thing, the other big one is plant protein. So more than one of you sent me an email and said, well, if I'm not eating animal protein, where am I going to get enough protein? Beans, especially soy. Soy is a cool cross paper if you're inspired. Anyway, I had a class. They have beans every day, every meal. Do that. 30 days, eating beans every meal for 30 days. Wow. Imagine what that would do. But yeah, my cat, this is not my cat, but when I come home from the tofu store, my cat goes crazy. He can smell it. And we learned really fast after the first time when I just left it on the counter and went back out to my bike and came in, and the cat, who's not supposed to jump up on the counter, was already up there unwrapping the tofu for us. All right, this is just another example, human growth hormone. I have had somebody pick this as their topic. So alpha helix, beta sheets, it's much, much larger. Insulin's only like 51 amino acids, and this one's 191. And it actually is the same size as its receptors. So you can see these are areas of hydrophobic, and so it's attracted to areas of hydrophobic and hydrophilic. The attraction between the receptor and the hormone, it's an attraction. So we talked about this with enzymes, that you don't want it to be a covalent because we want the hormone to leave and stop stimulating. So what human growth hormone does is it's in children. And so you can defy aging and feel younger if you feel like you're 20 again, if you're human growth hormone. And this is a guy, it's photoshopped. It's a little scary picture. We'll move on. But you can go and buy it. This is its clinical name. You can order right now. We can click on it. No, it does repairs your tissues and helps you to grow when you're a child and you are growing. And as you get older, levels naturally decrease and you start having weaker bones and decreased muscle mass and increased body fat. Or you could just keep using your body in a healthy way. And your heart is a muscle, and so you have fatigue. And right, when we put people your mood is affected, your motivation is affected. You guys all know this. When you don't do anything, you become extremely apathetic and your will becomes affected because, again, which came first doesn't matter. So how can you make more? Oh, right, this is the fountain of youth. We can all look like that just by doing hormone replacement therapy. Oh, didn't they do like a long study for decades on women, and now it's no longer, they don't do that. Now we're doing it with growth hormone. Okay. So rather than answering those ads, well, okay, we can't go back to being a baby, but when a baby sleeps, they produce delta brain waves. And this is when you guys all say, I don't sleep. This is what's not happening. You're not getting into the point of deep sleep where delta brain waves happen. Deep meditation also does it. So like the pictures of the Dalai Lama that you've seen. And so next one is oxytocin. This one has been picked, but anyway, previous human growth hormone, oxytocin always gets picked. This is the hormone, the love hormone. It's a trust-building hormone. It short circuits fear in humans. This is an amino acid sequence. There's only 8 amino acids, so these vary very different in size, each of the polypeptides. So it's also called the love hormone. It's called the bonding hormone. It's one of my favorite pictures of all times. This was, as I mentioned, you will be picking a topic. You will have to find 2 research papers on it, and you can have fun with them. They don't have to be these really clinical ones where, oh my goodness, there was one where they found kissing passionately actually decreases cortisol and increases oxytocin, especially in men. So you can find some fun studies like that. You gotta do more than just like one quote about it. You would have to talk a little bit more about it. And you can also, like, apparently on Etsy, you can buy jewelry. This would be a wonderful like bracelet. All right, it's got a number. It means it is one of the ones that is stimulated in meditation. And so chocolate also stimulates it, passionate kissing, orgasm, breastfeeding. So it is the bonding stimulated in, and also group flow. That is why I really miss the class, because when you have group, usually by now we'd be into the 6th week of the term. We're starting to get to know each other. There's a lot of dialogue going on during this lecture. And there is this flow that happens, and nurturing. The biggest mother load, it truly is the mother load, is at birth for mother and baby. And it is why they say you don't remember the pain or whatever, if there is such a thing as pain during the birth. It gives us an increased sense of empathy. So empathy is when you feel for other people. Trust and altruism. So altruism is where you give money to someone without wanting anything in return, and without even them acknowledging it. Sometimes it's giving money and not having them to have to know it was you. And also bonding. And it's why that there's like really cool studies with mothers. Like, you just know when your kid needs you, even if you can't hear them, even if you're in a different place. Duke University, go Blue Devils. Oxytocin appears to be part of the way our bodies support our spiritual beliefs. So meditation or deep prayer also. And that's a quote from Rumi that I absolutely love. With life as short as half taken breath, don't plant anything but love. Why would we? So oxytocin is about love, and today is Mother's Day as I record this, and so love releases oxytocin, and then oxytocin releases nitrous oxide, and that's picture Joey from 2005, and nitrous oxide releases endotropic factor, which is a cytokine, and it makes your heart act as an amplifier. Oh, remember I mentioned it's all about the vibrations. And oh, there's another picture of Joey, my mom's house. And happy Mother's Day to my mom. I just got to talk to her. And it increases the magnitude of the feeling in your mind. It's about the vibrations. And it's where the cytokines come in, because they're all about vibrations. And this is the rainbow that I'm doing here. So bonding or love, because every color has a different vibration. Universal gratitude and oxytocin. What a wonderful thing. And there's my mom and Joey back in 2005. Look at those sunglasses Joey's sporting. Aren't they awesome? And much love to all of your moms and to all of you who are moms on Mother's Day. This is key. It is importance of having a purpose in life, always. And yeah, no matter what age we are always important. And my mom's like, you guys can come here this summer. She's not worried about us coming. So even the train doesn't happen, we're driving across the country to visit her. And she said we didn't have to sleep outside the whole time. So she's not worried about it. I already got her sick at Christmas, so I probably gave it to her back then, because she was sick for 2 weeks with this cough. I got really sick. I haven't been that sick in a long time. I did not leave my room for 2 days. Joey would remember that. All right, this is, I added this one. This was, somebody did this as a research paper, and so this is my attempt also to stimulate you to get an idea. Iris is the rainbow goddess. She came on the rainbow bringing messages in, I think, Greek mythology, and yoga stimulates the release of this. And so it is called the exercise hormone. So Miranda did a wonderful paper last term on a neurotransmitter, polypeptide, mini polypeptide, that's also released in exercise. This one was discovered in 2012. And whenever you exercise, your muscles produce it. And also whenever you jiggle or shiver. So usually the air conditioner would be on crazy in our classroom right now, and we'd all be shivering. And you're releasing irisin. It's just like the miracle hormone. And you'd be giggling. Every time you giggle, it's really hard to giggle and not jiggle. Go ahead, try it right now. Just giggle and see if you can giggle without jiggling or wiggling. It's impossible. All right, and just do some yoga. Darth Vader. All right, it is the miracle. You know, I think it'd be actually really hard because that suit was not, I don't know, it's advanced technology, so maybe it did move with him. It's a miracle fat burner. And it turns, see, look at those guys. They're doing their yoga. It turns white adipose storage into brown adipose, whatever that all means. But white adipose is your storage fat, and brown adipose is what you burn when you're doing exercise. And so it actually changes your adipose from white into brown, apparently. It promotes apoptosis, which is death of cancer cells. There we go. That should have been when Darth Vader came up. So why exercise is crucial when you have cancer. So they used to tell you when you had cancer, just stay home and rest and do nothing and isolate yourself. And what are we finding right now? That the people who are going outside and getting fresh air, we've had the most beautiful spring. Anyway, when you exercise, and they tell you when you have cancer, you need to go for a walk every day. They're not saying go and run a marathon, but they tell you got to go for a walk every day. It is protective of your brain. So neuroprotective means it protects your brain. It helps long-term memory. And what do we do to people when we put them into facilities? They're not getting out and exercising. Just simple walk. It coordinates movement of your voluntary muscles. It's an antidepressant. That would be what mine would look like. These guys are amazing, and I wish, yeah, that could be like an extra credit. Can you make gingerbread cookies that like don't resemble that would be jolly and happy? All right, and your brain reward motivation center, it's anti-inflammatory, it's an antioxidant. Right, there's our happy heart. Your heart is a muscle. It protects your heart and actually decreases blood pressure. This is a reminder, you want to have studies, and you will be able to find tons of studies. And yeah, it's a wonderful topic. There's so many studies you can find, and studies you can explain. So we're almost at the end. Just a reminder, so 3 chemical classes of hormones. The steroids are special because they're hydrophobic, so they cross into the cell and bind the DNA. Polypeptides and amino acid derivatives are hydrophilic, and so they bind their receptor on the cell membrane. They do not go in the cell, but they are amazing. Interestingly here, human growth hormone and oxytocin were ones that we want to release. And epinephrine, there was our beautiful, right, meditation. My next slideshow is going to talk about your lab that you're going to start doing. So the stress response, again, is the cortisol and adrenaline, or epinephrine and adrenaline are the same thing. So released from your adrenals, and does all these things, which decreases and leads to, right, stress anytime. So we are the only species, I'm going back, we are the only species that have that choice. We can actually create stress that is not there. What has been going on is an example that fear. We've had a fear mentality, and what we need is the healing response. We are the only species that has a choice. We can choose to be constantly in this fight or flight, or we can choose to be releasing these. I'll be talking about the endorphins in the next slideshow, which I love this, collect and protect. So you have the choice. This guy is one of, I just learned about him like a year ago, and he's 3 books out. He is considered, every year, someplace comes out with the 100 most beneficial beings to our planet. So like the Dalai Lama is on that list. And Bruce Lipton is always on the list. He was a scientist who had looked under a microscope, and then one day he just had an epiphany, and he realized it's not about the DNA, that your thoughts determine what you're in. Are you in fear, or are you in love? And you have the choice. That is what makes us special. And so for me, I choose love. I always choose love. It's my heart there. And you should too. And thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we will stop our recording.